Beanie. It's just a house shirt. I got it from my dad. Did you know my dad keeps all of the first run of Transformers in the family vault next to my birth certificate? So, I think that goes to show where my dad's priorities lie. But anyways, howdy friends. Welcome back to the lab. Back in October, I made my first warband for the legendary skirmish game Mordheim. This warband was the Restless Dead, fell servants of an undying lich who have come to the city of the damned in order to grab Wyrdstone, which is apparently pronounced Weirdstone, but that sounds real kind of weird. Stone. When I make a batch of minis for a game, I generally don't like having just one team. My first entry into the skirmish scene was Kill Team, and like a lot of people, my first kill team was Deathwatch. However, it felt kind of weird to have only one team and no opposition. At my girlfriend's suggestion, and because she is a total Necron diehard, we ended up getting a kill team of Necrons to go with it. It just felt more complete, you know? Like having both sides of the coin, you know? With each of those factions actively having a reason to antagonize each other. And that logic brings us to my second Mordheim video, because it just would feel weird with only one, you know? Plus, I've had all these models sitting on my desk for about 3 months now, and I'm kind of getting tired of looking at them, so I kind of just want them out of my face, you know? I'm going to assume you've at least watched my other Mordheim video, so you kind of know, like, what the game is, the vibes, the list building mechanics, you know. Despite my love of explaining the same shit over and over again, I'm trying to keep the length of this video down a little bit, so... Failure. Plus, I'm trying to squeeze out an extra video before I leave town at the end of February for a little while, so, you know, we gotta kind of compress the... You know, I was honestly considering being really cheeky and just copy-pasting that whole section of the video in here, but... I think that's a little too far for me. As my first warband was Bones on Bones, I wanted something a little more on the quote-unquote good side, and I know it's Warhammer, so it's like not really necessarily good, but less bad. Basically what I'm trying to say is I'm making some humans today. Now the core rulebook of Mordheim does actually come with a few variants baked in to regular humans, and what I decided to go for were Marienburgers. Marienburgers, for lack of a better term, are filthy fucking rich, a product of their vast market expertise and their master craftsmen. Now, most Mordheim warbands start their warband. Mordheim's rules state that most warbands start with about 500 gold, but Marienburgers enjoy an extra 100 gold at the start of their warband. If you decide to play at any points, or I guess crowns cost, like if you started with 1,000, then this rule is instead changed to an extra 20%. And if you think about it, in a game at this scale, 20% is, you know, that's not anything to laugh at.
You probably shouldn't laugh anymore.
This, combined with the fact that humans are not necessarily super expensive, ended up with me having quite a bit more models compared to my Restless Dead warband. I'd say quite a lot, but not a lot, but there's more. Okay, there's more. This warband may have the numbers advantage, but the Restless Dead still just passively cause fear on most of their units, so I like to think that kind of balances out in some way. After all, there's only so much you can expect from a random person when you tell them, you know, hey, charge the shambling undead masses, and you're paying them like a little over minimum wage, you know? Like, I wouldn't. Fuck that. If I'm gonna die for some rich fuck that doesn't care about me, I'm doing it in an air-conditioned office, okay? Since I'm not going to repeat all the other rules stuff that I said in the first video, let me just instead jump straight to the inspiration for this warband. I'm online a lot, in general. A little more these days because I'm in between jobs. But while doom scrolling through Instagram, I noticed a screen cap of a Twitter post, which is kind of dumb if you think about it. The phenomenon of website screenshots circling through other websites, whatever. Anyways, It was from an artist called Centuri-chan. I want to say Century, but like their OC is like Centurion themed, so I think it's Centuri-chan. Anyways, the post hit me with a revelation that I will literally never ever recover from. He says, if you think about it, Landsknechts are just medieval gyarus. For those unaware of niche Japanese fashion culture, gyaru is derived from the English word gal, and focuses on a women's fashion that was really popular in the 90s. Well, late 90s, early 2000s. It is most commonly depicted in Japanese media, characters with tan skin, blonde hair, and usually a fashion-minded, extroverted personality. It's not, like a rigid definition. There's actually a whole spectrum to this, I really wanted to say phenomenon. I mean, it's not a phenomenon. Gyaru is not simply just a fashion choice, as it usually promotes an attitude of cheerfulness and a trendy, non-conformative kind of aspect permeates through it, making it almost a lifestyle. Even within the niche of Gyaru, there are even more niches, sub-factions, flavors, if you will. And I'll rattle off a few of them here, just to kind of give you an idea of how broad something like this could be. You've got Hime Gyaru, Princess Gyaru, Hime Kaji, Princess Casual, Shiro Gyaru, which are Gyaru who like the fashion, but they don't necessarily want to do the tan One Gyaru, which is like older, mature sister Gyaru, Ora Ora Gyaru, which is a black clothes, rebellious kind of Gyaru, Roku Gyaru, which is like punk rock, Ganguro, which is like very tan skin, color nuke kind of Gyaru, and then like 10 other different fucking flavors that I didn't bother mentioning. But there's a lot to it, and this is a very gross oversimplification of things, but it's to get a point across. If you're interested, I'll link the Gyaru wiki down below, because of course there's a Gyaru wiki. There's a wiki on everything these days. So John, where the hell is this going? Now, I love Gyaru girls, from Instagram models to anime girls, whatever. Something about the character concept is so charming to me. So when I saw Centuri-chan's Landsknecht Gyaru character, she doesn't actually have a name, I knew I wanted to make my warband resemble this post here, this character. This character is going to be the direct inspiration for this entire warband, and I'll be referencing her throughout the video. Like I said, she doesn't have a name, so I'm just going to call her Gyaru-chan for the sake of having a word to reference her, as names, language, and sound waves traveling through the air tend to do. But before we build any models, or in this case, use the models I printed like a few months ago, we need to make a list so we know, what the actual plan is going forward. So yeah, let's knock that out. Now, before I get into the rules, which I have consistently fucked up every time I've tried, I will be invoking the Skirmish Game Protection Edict of 2024, which states, I made this warband this way for a video, and if I made an error, well, it's way too late to change it now. We are all shit out of luck. Now, I did quadruple check the rules this time around, and I'm fairly certain I didn't mess anything up. But if I did, I don't actually mind being corrected. I can't do anything about it except, try to be better next time. Because, like I said, our video's already here. You're watching it right now, But yeah, I'm not going to get mad or anything, Now, to actually get into the list, which is going to start off with a captain. Marienburg warbands require at least one captain and cannot have more than one, so we may as well, do that. This captain is going to be my personal Gyaru-chan. Given two-handed weapon as appropriate for a Landsknecht army, which falls in line with their common media depiction, where they are usually illustrated using a Zweihander, or polearm, Since she's my leader, and I've also got a little extra wiggle room from the Marienburg luxury bonus, I'm also going to gussy her up with some light armor and a helmet. It just feels kind of appropriate, Like, if this was a bare, naked unit, it would not necessarily fit with the theme of Marienburg in my head. So, we got to give her a little something. Plus, we're trying to be fashion conscious here, Really embrace the lifestyle. Now, my second hero is an immediate departure from that theme, because I am addicted to the Black Knight archetype. My second in command here is going to be a champion with loads of war gear, a genuinely horrifically expensive unit to guard my captain. The champion will also be using a double-handed weapon, a backup black powder pistol, and a very intimidating set of heavy armor and a helmet painted in black, which I'm sure will scare the ever-living shit out of any standard soldier attempting to assassinate my leader. Now, while there are Gyaru subtypes that could probably accommodate this all-black outfit that she is going to be wearing, in my mind, this character was goth, so I'm not changing that. She's 100% like super mega goth underneath that armor, and I'm not changing that. I have a really bad habit, especially in the days where I played a lot of like tabletop role-playing and Dungeons & Dragons and all that, where I make the concept of a character in my head and I give them some kind of lazy like identifying label, and it just kind of sticks, Like, I had a dwarf named Dunban Dropkick because I just never bothered to change his last name. And I was like, well, now I gotta change it to something cool. But I was like, what's cooler than Dunban Dropkick, So, when I give somebody a label, it usually sticks. What was I talking about? Oh yeah. The third hero on this list will be a young blood. I imagined a kind of like agile duelist character in my mind, lightly armored, quick with a blade, with, a little spunkiness, a little bit of something to prove to everyone. She'll be equipped with some light armor and a one-handed sword. The light armor does give her an armor save, but the sword also allows her to parry attacks for even more defenses. I think for as lightweight of a package as this girl is, she's going to be very hard to kill.
You fight like my sister. I fought your sister. That's a compliment. Blackguard!
In my previous Mordheim video, I was told that the meta is kind of to max out on as many heroes as possible, and thinking back to my time pulling my hair out with the Mordheim video game, that is kind of the case. However, just for thematic reasons, I decided to just leave these three heroes as the only ones that I would buy from the standard Marienburg list. That being said, I did opt to buy a hired sword. Just like the witch in my previous video, hired swords are outside mercenaries you can hire into your army as long as you can pay for them, afford their upkeep, and there are no rules saying, hey, I hate your faction's guts and I want to kill you. To reinforce the mercantilism aspect of the army, I wanted to hire a merchant. The merchant brings his contacts to use in the Warband, scoring free items and selling items for more profit, as long as I can afford his upkeep costs between fights. He also comes with his own gear, which is just a sword, but he also comes with his own bodyguard. The bodyguard acts as an extension to the merchant, providing extra manpower, but must stay within 1 inch of the merchant at all times, making them a package deal of sorts. The bodyguard also doesn't contribute to objectives or helping with looting after combat, so she'll be exclusively muscle. For the cost of 20 gold for the both of them, it should be a good addition to the team, like I said, as long as I don't mind him skimming money off the top. Now we're down to the troops, which will basically fall into 3 major classifications. There will be 6 warriors, with all 6 of them equipped with shields. 2 of them are going to have hammers, and 4 of them are going to have spears. I also considered dropping 2 spears for 2 swords for a little more visual variety, and swords are kind of like really powerful one-handed weapons, but I don't know, just I like basic troops having spears. It just kind of looks cooler, especially if you have more of them. Spear formations were popular in history for a reason, not because they were effective. It's definitely the style. None of these guys are going to have armor mechanically. Some will have some armor visually on the models, but the shield save will occasionally, prevent one of these soldiers from dying. So, it's a little something. And to finish this warband off, we're going to have 2 marksmen, both equipped with longbows and a single dagger. 2 ranged units gives this warband some kind of response to my Restless Dead warband, just in case the fear rolls are destroying them, although it's not necessarily an advantage against skeletons, ranged weapons are good against a multitude of things in Mordheim. I have heard many horror stories about the Skaven sling spam. I know it can get bad, but yeah, 2's good. With 3 Marienburg heroes, 8 troops, a merchant, and his bodyguard, that brings this warband up to a total of 13 models, which is dangerously close to the max of 15 that this warband can take. As I said before, the meta is the max on heroes, but I still do have 2 slots that I can fill down the road with 1 champion and 1 youngblood, being able to fill that slot. In general, I'm usually not a slave to any game's meta, as long as I can keep up, usually pursuing to try to do weird builds and other spicy things, or, thematic compositions. This warband is not necessarily shooting myself in the foot, but also allows some nice splitting of forces for weird battlefield maneuvers, which, as long as I can keep up and I can do weird things, I'm fine. And with the list established, we can finally pick out some models. As previously mentioned, this warband was 3D printed. I had to print out some zombies for my Restless Dead warband, and figured I had time to quickly print this one out on the side. I know the majority of people here prefer to kit bash with proper resins and plastics, but as my money is a little tight right now, 3D printing is cost effective as shit for me.
Although, if you want to help me get some of that plastic, I do have a Patreon link, just saying.
This works for both of us, huh?
These models were the very last thing I printed out of my Anycubic Photon, which was really suffering from this layer delamination issue that I couldn't quite get solved. In retrospect, I think it's an issue with the FEP film, but instead of fixing the issue, I was going to upgrade to a mono 4K anyways, which is what I've been using since. So a lot of these minis are going to have a few of the weird horizontal line error that my zombies suffered from in the last video, which apparently a lot of you guys really liked. A lot of people said it looks like some kind of like haunted CRT effect, and I kind of agree actually. I don't know how effective that aesthetic is going to be on tan Japanese ladies, but we'll worry about that when we get there. If I was really concerned, I would just reprint these minis, but seeing as I already had them in front of me, and let's just do it. Now Gyaru-chan sets the tone for both the building and painting. She is my holy tome in essence. So for this project, we're gonna need some Landsknecht minis. I was hoping to find some female ones, and I actually did find some, and it happened to be from a mini maker I really like. This is the Modular Swords for Hire Volume 2 by Victus. I'm sorry, I pronounced that wrong.
Victus!
This kit in particular is designed to make female warriors in a Landsknecht style. It also comes with a bunch of past kits packaged in for making a few armored variants, light armored units, got a bunch of loose parts. So this single kit here will be perfect for all 8 of my troop minis. For my heroes though, I grabbed specific minis. For Duelist, like I said, I was considering like an agile sword fighter, and I really ended up liking this elven fighter. However, Victus had this Musketeer miniature that I felt matched the vibes a little bit more due to a bit more flamboyant attitude, and the puffy sleeves were definitely a given. I'd say this was a major loss for the elf bros, but honestly, Rosalinda and Eltalinda have never left my army since I got them, and Rosalinda won the Waifu Bowl over some stiff competition, so it probably evens out. Unlike myself, choosing my Black Knight mini was actually not that hard, as I used this Field Marshal from Reptilian Overlords. If you watched my previous video on the Knights of Gold and wondered why I had this model in particular misprinted, all ready to salvage a plume from, this warband is the reason why. I actually combined it with a matching kit, the Landsknecht Duelist, since this kit came with a pistol hand I could use on the armored Field Marshal. Honestly, this Duelist mini right here would be pretty good for any kind of gun-toting hero, but you know me, I'm addicted to heavy armor, so we'll move on. The Merchant was a bit of a journey, as I needed to account for the Merchant and the Bodyguard together. Ve Victus had a really good Merchant mini that I just kind of thought of as the perfect mini, and for most people I'd say this is 100% the move. However, I really wanted my Merchant to kind of have like sugar daddy vibes to it, like a little bit of an aura, you know, and he had the aura, but it wasn't really hitting that kind of aura I wanted. I wanted sugar daddy, not, you know, ugly bastard vibes. That's not a slight on the mini. Like I said, this is probably, like, if I think of a Mordheim Merchant, it's this guy, you know. I had to think on it for a while until one day I remembered some very niche Warhammer lore, the Kingdoms of Ind. The Kingdoms of Ind are located in the Far East and are sometimes called the Land of 1,000 Gods. Sitting on a peninsula south of Cathay, the area is said to be home of great rainforests in the central areas. Ind is known as a popular destination with traders for their exotic goods, such as unseen spices and large amounts of jade. While the area's dominant population is human, Ind is home to the race of beastmen who are more similar to cats, as opposed to the more common types of beastmen found in the Old World. The most common tribe of these catmen are the Tiger Men, although given how little attention this area has received over the years, I wouldn't be shocked if there were more types of cat people running around. I don't know, maybe you got the Cheetah Men living in there. But anyways, I dropped the sugar daddy angle, and I wanted my Merchant to be a trader hailing from the outskirts of Ind. Ve Victus, again, had this mini, the Tabaxi Merchant, that was pretty good for what I wanted. His bodyguard, however, would be a battle-hardened warrior of the jungle. For this I ended up using Velrock miniatures, as his female Leonin warrior model had a sword variant, so I snatched that up. Both of these models stand out wildly from the rest of the army by design, and you'll see later that we'll push their paint schemes to their limits as well. Some people may accuse me of jumping through a lot of hoops to justify adding a stoic, sexy cat girl to my warband. The captain of this warband was a bit of a challenge, as there were a lot of good candidates for the final model. Initially, I looked at the Landsknecht Mercenaries from Miniatures Blueprint, but I kind of had a Zweihander in mind for this, and I was kind of, you know, focused on it. I wasn't completely opposed to a halberd, but yeah, I kept looking, as this was just the first one I had found. I looked at Lady Merica from Artisans Guild. The sword itself was on fire, but it's not a deal breaker. That could be altered into a normal sword. The kit is stated to be modular, so I suspect there may be a non-flaming sword variant baked in, but I didn't buy it, so I'm unsure. The model itself looked awesome, but it was a bit too serious for me, a bit too gruff, you know. I came to Ve Victus's doorstep once again to consider the Landsknecht girl. A good amount of spunky attitude, and wielding that Zweihander I had my eyes on, but is a little on the plain side. It did fit in perfectly with my troops in terms of style and scale, because, you know, the same fucking guy made it. And this model actually became my strongest contender for a little while, but I started, you know, searching around still. I put the search off for a few days until coming back to it randomly at like 4 a.m., and I noticed that Twin Goddess Miniatures had actually uploaded their own Landsknecht girl, Lady Inez. Now this model has a lot going for it. Girly hair accessories, ornate, gaudy armor, the Zweihander, and a little bit of an attitude. However, it differed in scale, so she was a bit taller and a little bit skinnier than the troops. I tossed all of these girls around for a while until leaving the vote to my patrons. The final two contenders were Lady Inez and Ve Victus's girl, and Inez won it out by just a little bit, leaving us with one captain. I did scale her down though, about 5% in my slicer, to sorta help her taller stature, but I realized it was a fruitless endeavor, so I wasn't gonna get a perfect match, so I didn't try too hard there. With the models picked out, everything was printed, like I said, on my old Photon. These parts needed washing and cleaning and touch-ups, but I did all that off screen, mainly because that's boring and nobody wants to see it. None of the hero units really needed a lot of work, so most of the labor fell onto the troops. Even after the cleanup, there wasn't a lot to do besides assembling the parts with gel superglue. But there were some special steps for the spears and bows. The spears and bows were both replaced with brass rod and styrene rod, as the resin was both warped and still a little bit fragile even after curing. This was easily accomplished by drilling a hole through the hands that were holding the weapons and sliding in brass for the spears and a styrene rod for the two longbows. It may seem like I kind of zoomed through the assembly stage for all of this, but that's because I kind of did. All of the hero models were one part, and once you built one spearman, it's the same thing for the rest of them. The hammer-wielding warriors were even easier since they just needed a straight assembly. One thing I did want to do was string my bows though. This was easily done by drilling holes through the styrene rod, which would have been much harder to do with a resin bow. Not impossible though, you just don't drill the holes and pay a little bit more attention to when you're tensioning it off. But yeah. I took a piece of thread and quickly passed it over a lighter to singe off the stray hairs. My lighter actually died on the second bow, so you'll be able to see what it looks like if you do this step and if you don't. I grab a long section of thread and pass it through the hole, gluing one side in place. When it's dry, you add a little tension to the thread as you pass it through the second hole, gluing it into place as you hold it taut. With the thread anchored on both sides, wrap the damn thread around the ends of the bow. This step is multi-purpose, as it helps keep the tension of your bow, especially if you're using resin with no holes drilled. And if you did drill holes, this helps cover it up. It's a bit fiddly, and it's a little easier if you can do this before attaching it to your mini. I would still recommend practicing on a bit of scrap before you do this on your models though, just in case. Also make sure your damn lighter works. As stated, my hero units didn't really need much more than 5 minutes each. The merchant needed a sword, so I printed and attached one, although I didn't have a scimitar, so I just ended up using a straight sword, which looks a little out of place. I'll say it was a gift. Even though I dropped this mini and snapped the sword in half afterwards, it is a gifted cursed sword. The Duelist and the Black Knight were straightforward, although I wanted my knight to be a little scary, so I actually scaled her up 20%. Some people in the Warband say she's like half ogre, but those are just rumors. No one's brave enough to actually ask, but no one can doubt her raw power. Finally, the Lady Inez model needed a small pin in her foot, although I did cut the pin too short, and she snapped off her base like twice during the painting process. That's just me though, I'm not used to working with such small spindly models like that. I printed Ve Victus's girl out as well, and with both models in hand, I genuinely think both of these models would have worked just fine for my captain. They both look great, Maybe I'll hire another champion down the line, or a young blood, and use the Ve Victus girl as that model, because I would like to use that model. Not just because I paid for it, but because I like it. Now, while I prime these models white, we need to get our color palette sorted, as this army will heavily play around with not only the color choice, but where those colors are distributed. I'll be pushing these colors around based on color theory, and that model's particular rank within the warband, so by establishing the palette now, I can use this as a point of reference as we walk through the models. This will hopefully also give you a little bit of insight on why I chose to put certain colors in certain spots, but also how you could extract your own color palette from your own reference art. As I'm looking to make this video a little bit on the shorter end though, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty on how to paint each particular model, but I'll explain enough to where you can, fill in the rest. First, let's get our Gyaru-chan reference up on screen again, and I just fucking love her. She's so cute. Now obviously the majority of the outfit is pink, so that's going to be our main color. Gyaru-chan has denim booty shorts, so we'll be using a blue, a little bit more of a dark blue as the secondary color. Blonde hair is a common trend amongst Gyaru subfactions, and probably the most identifiable thing to the wider public looking in. And sometimes it's dyed with dyed tips or streaks, but for simplicity here, we're going to keep blonde on the palette. That's also going to work for leopard print, another common sight in the Gyaru scene, which is found in the inner liner of her jacket. Yes, this is the second video in a row I will be painting leopard print, but only for one model. I don't want to overdo it in the video, but I don't want to overdo it for the army. It's a twofold restraint. However, the color of blonde and leopard print are mostly similar, so I'm going to be combining those into a mini palette of sorts, just so there's not, 5 or 6 different shades of yellow floating around. While Gyaru-chan here has purple on her hand wrap and her makeup, we're not going to be including in the base palette here, although we will be using a little palette shifting to include purple later. You'll see when we get there. Also, I had no confidence in myself to do anybody's makeup, so don't even fucking expect it. Just don't. If you look here, you can see that Gyaru-chan's belt is black, meaning our more practical accessories like shoes, belts, pouches can all be covered by black. Keep this roll as an accessory color in mind as we go forward. Finally, the majority of the metals are silver, but there are small areas of gold, although reserved to smaller ornamental areas. With this analysis, we have extracted our full Gyaru palette. Tan skin is a running theme in some flavors of Gyaru, but not all of them, with some explicitly leaving tans out, so the majority of my army's skin tones will stay in the same brownish area, with some room for variance. Those skin tones won't be included in this palette, but ignoring that, we have our colors going forward. The first thing I decided to work on were the standard spear and hammer warriors, which is where I ran into my first problem. I guess immediately is as good as time as ever to have a problem. As each soldier is going to have a different pattern to their outfit, I had to use batch painting to get all of the henchmen painted. This is really bad because I'm a horrible batch painter and I always end up missing things, so I have to go back and redo a lot of things, which means any time that I would have saved is instantly lost, and then, and then some. After establishing each soldier as having black shoes and white socks, I decided to start with the darkest color, which is blue. As these sleeve areas were a recessed area and a raised section, I wanted to do white sections between and then blue on top. This was easily done with doing the inner white sections first with a sky gray, then the blues, which was a Vallejo dark blue. When the blue dried, I mixed it with 2 parts white and gave it a dry brush to give a nice light blue highlight to the edges. Sadly, when the wash went on in the later steps, the white inner recessed areas just kind of got drowned out completely. So this was, for lack of a better word, a complete waste of my fucking time. Next I moved to the pink areas, although I don't actually own a pink paint. Luckily, it's nothing I can't get mixed up, putting 1 part flat red paint with 4 parts pure white, giving me a nice, kind of salmony pink. I could have gone for a more paler pink, more akin to the reference art, but using this more middle of the road pink will ensure the highlights will pop at a distance whenever those go on later. I did attempt to mix that pink with pure white to get a highlight color, but I quickly discovered that just pure white was not only faster and easier, but the more vibrant highlight color for this pink. I went around the warband filling out pinks before stopping to do the silvers, mainly to account for the sash that goes over the breastplate on the hammer troops. This was mainly to save time, as seeing as I had like 12 more fucking models to paint, I needed all the time I could get. Although, like I said, with all the errors I made, I didn't really save time at all. When the batch was caught up, I painted a section on some of them in ochre, with upper sections painted yellow and highlighting those sections with a tan dry brush. I was initially going to do leopard print on these sections, but I decided to leave the design for the more senior Gyarus in the warband. As low-level menials, they simply get a portion of their outfit in the same color to invoke the idea of leopard print. Now you guys know I'm totally game to freehand a bunch of leopard print on 10 minis. Like, I don't care, I'm unhinged, I'll do it. I felt this was a better aesthetic decision, which also helped cut down the painting time, the processing time for this project, so, you know, twofold benefits there. After the faux leopard print sections, I painted the skin tones across the girls, ranging from a pale brown to black skin to a familiar orangey tan. Like I've said repeatedly, I'm really not good with skin tones in general, so these could be better, but when the wash goes over them later, I think it'll be fine. Not great, but fine. I also took a minute to paint the shields, masking half of the face with some masking tape, that's what it's fucking called. Anyways, I sponged on pink on one half and then moved the tape to the other side to do blue. I could have been more creative with the design in retrospect, but a half and half design isn't plain, you know? Like, compared to my other options of just plain silver or a single colored face, I think the half, you know, it's okay. I can't fret over every detail, otherwise I would just be working in circles. As the last step for these models, I reached for the tried and true marine juice. 1 part Army Painter Brown, 1 part Army Painter Black, and 2 parts glaze medium. Although I initially did forget the glaze medium and was really confused as to why my shade was so strong. Longtime viewers know that I love this as universal wash, as it doesn't tint the base coats as much as a normal wash, but still does a great job hitting those recessed areas. I use a 1:1:1 mixture sometimes when I need a bit of a stronger kick, but if you want an even softer wash, you can add as much glaze medium as you want to this mix and just slop it over anything. I set the troops off to the side to dry and turned my attention to the Duelist. The Duelist generally follows the same scheme as the other troops, but featuring a more structured color scheme as opposed to a more eccentric pattern. The blue pants are similar to Gyaro-chan's shorts, but otherwise pink is more prominent on the mini overall. It also integrates gold onto the sword, establishing a theme of more senior ranking units having more pink and gold in prominent parts of the model. This model does keep its leopard print, however, which has just simply been moved to the back of the mini. While everything was painted as previously described, the base of the scarfy bits were sponged with tan on top of a brown base coat, simultaneously highlighting it and adding a texture. I wanted to integrate some more yellow into this section to match the troops, so I glazed both areas with a light yellow glaze, not to turn it yellow entirely, but just to kind of push it that way in spots, you know? Now we do the spots, which I made using a 2:1 mixture of brown and orange. Orange was my effort to fine-tune the leopard aesthetic a little bit, but I pushed it a little too orange for my taste instead of a lighter brown. But, you know, let's move on. Just don't use orange. Down the road, just don't use orange. Or if you do, use like a tiny little bit. As I described in my last video on the Knights of Gold, the best way I found to do leopard print is to just pull up a picture of some leopard print and just try your best to emulate each of the blobs you see. Keep them tight, but not too tightly packed, since after you do the spots, you have to get your sharpest brush and make a broken black outline for each spot. I found it looks the best to outline each spot with 2 breaks around its perimeter, or essentially 2 wiggly lines around each spot. Just thin your paint a little more than normal, use a brush with a good tip, and brace yourself on the desk to keep your hands as steady as possible, even if you are making wiggles intentionally. With a wash over this mini, that makes 9 models down, 4 to go. Now we're moving to the merchant, so let me explain a little bit of this color palette shifting I've been talking about. As the merchant and bodyguard are considered outsiders hiring into the Marienburgers, I wanted them to stand out. However, I still want their colors to still relate to the warband. Like, I'm not going to give them neon green or some shit, you know? If you look at a color wheel, my most prominent color is pink, which is about here-ish. By shifting the pink in either direction around the wheel, we end up at both purple and red, which are an analogous match to pink. So while the merchant's color scheme is not pink by design, using purple and red keeps the color scheme in the same neighborhood. Black and white are also graduated to more prominence, as the sleeves are white and the vest is black. The most visually striking part of the outfit is going to be the shawl, which I'm going to try an experiment that doesn't really match with anything, but I want to try a snakeskin print pattern. The first step to this was mapping out the diamond-esque pattern of snakeskin on a photo in GIMP, trying my damnedest to account for the folds in the cloth. My logic was that if the spacing was consistent at the top and bottom edges of the shawl, it might not look that weird, and you can kind of get away with a little bit of inconsistency in the middle portions. With a plan, I started to dot the lines with black, making a diamond grid pattern. Within each diamond, I do a smaller diamond with tan, leaving me with, it's certainly, well, it's kinda snakeskin. It's at least an interesting print. I gotta work on this one a little bit. I think I'm onto something, but I'm not quite there. But for a first try, it doesn't look too bad. Anyways, let's knock out the bodyguard real fast. As the merchant was an outsider by design, I wanted the bodyguard to be even further removed from the palette, due to hailing from the remote deep jungles of Ind. To do that, I eliminate pink from the scheme entirely, marking her as an outsider, while also removing the authoritative theme of pink to mark her as simple hired muscle. Rank-wise, she may sit even lower on the rungs as troops, but she is distinguished in that way, as if being removed from the hierarchy empowers her. While the cat people of Ind are most commonly described as tiger pattern, I didn't want to introduce orange into this color palette. Well, not on purpose anyways. I chose to make her a black-furred catwoman, as black was already in the palette. Remember when I mentioned that black is an accessory color? She is, in a sense, the merchant's accessory, the term even slightly dehumanizing her, which adds to the intimidating aura when combined with her stoicism. She's a grumpy fish out of water, and while it might not be her intent to stonewall people, she is in a foreign land, maybe not necessarily has a grasp on the language. So the color palette slightly reinforces this sense of being removed, the solid black being the forefront of the mini, instead of a supporting color to a more flamboyant and vivid color selection. That being said, I did use blue on the ornamental feathers found on the mini, which still tied the mini to the original palette, but through a secondary color of blue and not the primary color of pink. Sporting the most gold across all the models, the bodyguard simultaneously stands with one foot completely removed from the palette, yet conforming to it entirely, as there are no exclusive colors here at all. Honestly, I love this little color experiment and how it ties into a narrative, and this is part of the reason why. I don't know how valid any of this is, nor would I know what to even refer to it as, but if you think of it in a storytelling perspective, I think it falls into place. I'd also fall into place for a huge furry muscle mommy, although I'd prefer her to just throw me. The Black Knight. Well, another Black Knight, as I am doomed to repeat myself over and over, although this may be my first female Black Knight. As with the bodyguard, the most prominent color of the scheme is black, to exclude the many from conforming to the eccentricity of the rest of the Marienburgers. However, unlike that muscle mommy, this muscle mommy will feature pink with no blue. This is sort of the thematic opposite of the bodyguard. Both sport predominantly black color schemes, but unlike the bodyguard, the inclusion of pink illustrates the fact that she belongs to the warband naturally and is also a symbol of her authority. As we established earlier, the more pink you are, the more pull you have in the warband, essentially, in terms of color. The Black Knight's pink sections were painted as normal, except using a darker base pink as the base coat, before layering the existing salmony pink on top. As the pink is across much larger areas, I felt this pink gave those areas just a bit more depth than they would have without it. I mainly applied this logic to the cape, sponging on highlights to bring out the volumes of the sculpt. I also took some pink contrast paint and glazed it over the fabrics to help these colors blend in just a little more. I think it worked really well, and after a wash of that marine juice, I just love how this mini looks. Now that's not just cause I know there's a hot stoic goth muscle mommy underneath the armor, but the intimidation this model brings to the warband, genuinely towering above anyone else, with a sword even taller than she is. With the 20% scaling added on to this model, this model is genuinely taller than a Primaris Marine, possibly giving those half-ogre rumors a tinge of truth. And with the Black Knight done, we move to our final model, the Capitan. The captain was painted the same way every other model was, just with a bit more precision since she is the leader and has to look nice on a YouTube thumbnail. On the Gyaru scale, her outfit is predominantly pink and features many gold accessories, making her the leader at a glance. You could argue that the piece of construction equipment I just painted definitely gives more leader vibes, but you gotta think about that black. While the Black Knight is certainly more intimidating, her armor denotes that she is not the leader of this warband. The main standout here on the captain is the hair, which is a big part of this Lady Inez sculpt. I opted for the signature Gyaru blonde, using ochre as a base, then dry brushing tan on top of it. You could say it's more of a dirty blonde as opposed to a neutral, regular blonde, but given that the blonde hair was compressed into the color scheme of the leopard print, I don't really mind it. It is much less yellow, as the troops are simply using low quality fabrics compared to the objectively best hair color for women. Also, since the hair is so prominent on this mini, and no other model really has the capacity to accommodate crazy hair, I decided to give her dyed tips. That's right, in my Gyaru warband, pink tips is a badge of office. If that is not unique in the Mordheim scene, then I don't know what is. The tips were done by glazing my base coat pink with some glaze medium. After the model was washed, I came back in afterwards with more glazes to reinforce the pink that might have gotten slightly muted by the marine juice wash. I also forgot to film this part, but when the hair was dry, I went back in to paint the flower ornaments on her hair with a blue. This was highlighted with dots of that same light blue from earlier, and a dot of gold in the center of each flower to kind of give the impression of hair accessories. I quickly knocked out the bases with some black and gray dry brushing to keep in line with my other Mordheim projects, and the warband was done. Despite me feeling pretty lackluster to humans in Warhammer Fantasy, as opposed to the cooler skeletons and cooler lizard men, I have to say I really love my warband here. I had a lot of fun pushing and pulling the color scheme to invoke different themes in a flavor of color language or color theory. It's all somewhere in here, somewhere. I think it really helped assigning a certain narrative property to each individual color so I could assemble a theme from them, like Lego with only slightly less plastic. While my painting was less in-depth than normal here in this video, I hope this can help someone looking to make their own unique warband or army. Just like the Restless Dead, my lore on the warband was a little light, but extensive color work here will help me draw a personality and a character from these minis if the time ever came to flesh them out for a proper narrative campaign. I think the only part I'm really unhappy about in general are the skin tones. I just really suck at skin tones, and they're not fun to paint, and I hate any project that involves painting them. It's probably the quickest mood killer for me when it comes to painting a project, and that makes me want to not try very hard on them in general. Plus, on top of that, you know, all the challenges of painting a decent looking face. You have to make a decent looking feminine face as well. So you can't really just slop on a bunch of wash, get a bunch of hard shadows and say, good enough. You know. I mean, I guess you could. That's that's what I did here. It's a really base coat, wash, and tolerate it until I put the models away kind of approach. And I recognize that it's one of my shortcomings as a painter, but maybe I'll find some special project along the way that makes me want to try harder on them. But for now, yeah, just get that shit out of my face. I'd like to say thank you for watching, and an extra special shout out to all my new members on Patreon, or as I like to call them, a fucking godsend for helping cover my bills in this wage slavery interregnum I've somehow found myself in. I'd like to say thank you to Slurgical, which is simultaneously ambiently gross and oddly threatening, Joseph Anderson, Dawn, Starkiller, and Black Falcon 501. If you'd like to support the channel and add your name to my list of patrons, consider visiting me on Patreon. If subscriptions aren't your thing, I've also recently opened up access to each post in a pay-per-post kind of style, where you pay to access posts you want without a subscription. Patreon added this a while ago, I just never got around to enabling it. But I wanted it as an option for people who don't like reoccurring subscriptions, just want to see one thing, you know. I like giving you guys more options in general. I tried to set access to each post to $1, but Patreon wouldn't let me go under $3. I think it matched my lowest membership tier, but I'm not really sure. Or if you just want to leave a tip, there's Ko-fi. I mean, Ko-fi exists. More than any of that bullshit, though, I would love it if you liked the video, maybe even share it with a friend, or maybe even subscribe. For every like on this video, I will hook one of you guys up on a date with a cute Gyaru girl of your own. So for the sake of the lab community, like the video, guys. Some of you guys are desperate. I'm just trying to, do my part. No super long outro this time, as I'm going to try to get one more video cranked out before my February hiatus. So once again, thank you guys for watching. Keep an eye on my community tab for updates, and have a good one.